Hi, my name is Carley Roberts. I'm a partner with Sutherland Asbill and Brennan in Sacramento.
And I'm Prentiss Willson of counsel to Sutherland in Sacramento.
We're going to talk with you for a few minutes today about alternative apportionment and the General Mills decision that came out in late 2012. General Mills is the last amongst a series of cases involving the sales factor and what should be included within the sales factor. The first series of cases focusing on Treasury gross receipts, and General Mills a little different. It was focusing on the commodity futures hedging that General Mills engaged in. The court held that the proceeds from commodity futures hedging activity are includable as gross receipts, so they go in the sales factor. But it also held that there was enough distortion with regard to those receipts that alternative apportionment should apply.
So in this sense, it's become a conventional apportionment case, Section 18 apportionment case. And I believe you are the counsel who won the only case that's out there so far where a taxpayer has prevailed in California on this issue for Home Depot.
That is true. Well, it certainly is it's still an interesting and fascinating area, and I think now we have, looking at the qualitative and quantitative differences reached in this particular decision, it's really a question of now whether we've got a new era in California for apportionment controversies.
Well, let's look at what they did to see. Again, they looked at both qualitative differences and quantitative differences. And on the qualitative side, this is the most astonishing part, I think, to us because, as the court acknowledged, this is the most central activity you could imagine, key to keeping the cost of raw materials down or protecting them against a rise in cost of raw materials. And the court acknowledged that. They didn't try to separate it out and nevertheless concluded that they could split this out and look at then quantitative differences to see if there was sufficient distortion so that it didn't reflect the business done in the state. And here they looked at kind of conventional metrics for measuring that activity and determined that the profit margin, importantly, was 81 times greater on the non-futures profits than on the futures activity.
Right. And there was a fairly equal discussion on both sides, both in terms of qualitative and quantitative differences. On really focusing on the qualitative differences, Prentiss, you mentioned that with regard to the actual hedging activity, the court actually went so far as to say that it was a critical support function to the actual business of General Mills. So when you look at what they do, selling consumer food products, flour, grain, this was a support function that was deemed to be critical. But despite the fact its closeness to the business and supporting the profitability of the overall business, still there was qualitative distortion because it was a risk management tool. It wasn't making any profit. The profit margin was so much greater. We'll get to that shortly. But it really draws out in California, what about otherwise diverse businesses? Unitary business where you have one entity inside California, one outside. Unitary businesses where you have entities both inside and outside California. When you look at those businesses and you start to compare them in the same way that the court did in General Mills, and you see a distortive effect once you have the apportionment formula coming together, do you now have instances where you're going to be able to say that there are entities that should not be included within the combined return?
Yes. How do you mesh this with the third part of the regulation, that strong centralized management coupled with centralized departments is enough to make diverse businesses unitary? Those businesses are so much less related to one another in all of these cases than what was involved here.
Right. No, it really does draw in General Mills. Is it limited really to qualitatively different circumstances? Are you only looking at within one particular business like this with the hedging transactions, or is it going to be broader in scope?
Well, that's certainly the argument I think that we can expect FTB to make, because they are not going to want to get to the quantitative distortion differences. And here I just note, I've had decades where they have told me, you can't use separate accounting data to impeach formulary apportionment. That's exactly what they did here. You can't attack a single factor, but you have to attack the overall formula. That's what they did here. So when we get to, we will find cases where the distortion is much, much greater here. They have lowered the bar substantially on the quantitative side. And we will find many more cases. I don't see, for example, how you'll be able to combine a supermarket, a notoriously low-margin business like a supermarket, with anything else. These are going to be difficult situations, but I think a lot of fun for us.
Yep. I think we'll definitely see litigation down the road, and stay tuned.